Yeah.
My name is Stefan. I'm the vice president of the Colfax Neighborhood Association, and Danielle Moe is the president. She couldn't be here today. Normally, she would be the one running this. We have the rest of our board members here as well: Chichi and Escola, treasurer, Vera Bucknell, for the EC3, and Veronica, also on the board and information officer, works for the Back Partnership. Thank you everyone for being here and all the candidates for showing up. We are going to do a candidate forum, allow all of the candidates an opportunity to answer questions that were put together by the ECNA board. We are going to do some announcements at the end as well, so if you feel like sticking around, this may go along. We'll see how long it actually goes. We think because of the format, we're going to do now 4 questions that we have prepared. We were going to do 5, so that each candidate could have an opportunity to answer first. But since we just have 4, we may cut that last question off. Each candidate gets 3 questions. That gives you 3 minutes to answer the question. So we'll ask the first question, start here, we'll pass the microphone down. Second question, we'll start here, pass the microphone down, come back. 3, 4. We've got a timer up here. Veronica will.
Yeah,
Chichi will be. It may be abrupt. You may block your camera from you. Let's see if I have any other things I need to mention. Oh, and then at the end, once we get through, since it'll be a little bit shorter, 4 candidates instead of 5, we'll have more time for audience questions. Feel free, audience members, there's some cards here. Hello. We have some cards here, so feel free if you want to write down a question that the candidates will answer at the end. Write them down and then you can pass them to myself or Veronica. But now that we have 5 candidates, we will be doing 5 questions, 3 minutes per question. So it should be around 75 minutes. Okay. Any questions, candidates, about any of that?
That's good math.
We double checked it earlier. We were wanting to make sure. And then we'll put in a couple plugs at the end about further events. There's 2 this weekend, 1 here on the 25th, Saturday, coffee and chat with candidates, and then, excuse me, Ashley Elementary on Saturday, the 25th, and then Sunday the 26th, and the coffee chat here. That's perfect. Okay, I think we got it. So I will just quickly introduce our candidates. And I'm sure you can reiterate if you like. When we're cutting your extra time, you're welcome to do that, but I'll do it just to cut some of that time. So Brad Rivera, whatever you want to do, Chantel Lewis, Lisa Twargowski, Leslie, excuse me, Twargowski.
You got
I know, I hope your name 3 times. This is Christian Stewart and Lewis. Right. So first question, we're going to start with Brad. And I'm happy to repeat it. And then in the chat, would you mind taking it? And I'll hand it to you afterwards. And if you want us to repeat, we can. Question is, what is your plan to balance the different neighborhoods across the district? East Colfax has different priorities from Central Park, Montbello, and North Park Hill. How will you ensure that East Colfax's concerns are prioritized?
Is it okay if I stay?
Sure.
So hi everyone, thank you again for coming tonight and doing your civic duty and becoming informed. My name is Brad Rivera. Just a quick intro about myself and I'll answer the question. So I'm a proud dad, husband, attorney by training, and then also a community leader here in the Northeast Denver area. I got my start in Denver, sort of Northeast Denver politics and government, working for then State Senator Mike Johnston. And the experience itself inspired me so much out of law school, and then ended up working for Attorney General Phil Weiser, and then I also helped start Denver and the state's youth apprenticeship system. And I say that in the context of most of my career has been spent in the nonprofit and government sector, where I've done a lot of listening and learning from community in order to help try to think of crafting a policy or implementing ideas so that they actually work out in the real world. Now, to get to that question here, this is an incredibly diverse district. As I go around District 8, you're right. Every neighborhood has different issues and concerns. So here's what I want to do to make sure that my office and my work is informed by the East Colfax community. So first and foremost, I want to establish a community cabinet. I will give a quick plug for my website. I've actually written out my plan for how I want to represent the district, and on that plan, you can actually, I want to get the ball rolling early. Obviously, need to get elected first, but if you want to be potentially considered for this community cabinet, you can actually go ahead and throw your name in that. But really, I want to use a community cabinet because that's actually what I ran for then State Senator Johnston. We actually had people from all across his very vast district that we represented. And they were there to sort of inform his work and his ideas for policy. And that's what I want to do here, is make sure that, I know for a lot of city officials that are at sort of the city level or at the district level, they may have a good view of what's going on at that level. But you folks are the only ones who know what's going on inside your community, on your street, in your neighborhood. So I want to make sure this community cabinet helps to do that and connect to that. Another thing I want to do is actually have our office spearhead volunteering at a different nonprofit in different parts of the district. And I say that because I want to make sure we are connecting our communities through service. And again, I think that's a great way to make sure in a non-formal, non-official setting, we're actually, sort of helping connect people and have conversations about what we can do differently in this district. So for me, I think the most important thing is to make sure that we are always in the community listening, connect that to the policy work and work we're doing inside of our communities. Thank you.
Just a heads up, we're aiming to record this and put it on Facebook. Sorry, Brad, we had a last minute computer switch, so we're just trying to get that up and running.
No, it's recording. It's
It's recording? Oh, it is recording. Great. I thought we had a recording. So, okay. Same question. Do you want us to re-ask it or?
Balance or Colfax.
Yeah. How do you balance neighborhood priorities?
Yep, you got it. So hi everyone, my name is Chantal Lewis, and we're District 8. I actually grew up in 5 Points. I grew up around the time of busing, and so I was bused from the neighborhood. I'm in 5 Points to home elementary was more affluent school. My mother understood the importance of education and obtaining an excellent education. And so we were responsible with kids to get ourselves up in the morning. And as you might guess, we would miss the bus sometimes because that's what kids do. And so if our neighbor wasn't home or we didn't have the chance to sit on the public bus, RTD, so we're gonna stick off that mattress too. We didn't go to school. And so at a very, very young age, I became aware of what it meant to provide access and oftentimes what barriers exist to that access. School for us wasn't just about education, it was also where we would keep our meals as well. And so it was a very important part of our day. And I really carried that lens from my early education to my middle school and to my high school times as a young mom. I had a kid when I was 16 who just turned 20 on Sunday, and I have a 1-year-old foster kid that I am taking care of as well. And so really finding my precision and my pursuits of justice from that lens as a young kid. When we talk about balancing neighborhood priorities, I think I've done a pretty swell job actually at the RTP board where I believe in co-governance. So I'll talk about the differences when, from a city council perspective, constituent services and co-governance. So constituent services is exactly what you might think. If you all call my city council office with a concern, then I will address that concern. Co-governance is actually working in partnership with each one of you to assess what are the important issues within the community so that we might be able to create those priorities. My goal, once I'm elected to Denver City Council, is to actually work in partnership with you all to create those assessments. I want to know what's important to you in your communities. I don't want to assume, but there are issues in our communities that are important, such as housing. And I know that to be true. And so that is a lens in which I'm looking at in terms of my leadership, but when I think about my approach to working in partnership with all of you, is going out to the different neighborhoods, working with the different departments within the city and saying like, what's going well, what's not going there? What are the challenges that you all have had in terms of representation from a city council lens within this district, so that we are co-creating plans together. And so that is how I plan to balance it, is to do it in partnership with you all. One of the things that I said when I was elected to RTD is how afraid I was to govern alone. And so I say the same thing with city council, is I don't want you all to get me elected and then be like, all right, you got it, good luck. But to actually work in partnership with me to build a stronger community.
Thank you, and Stefan, would you do me the favor of be asking questions, please?
Sure.
We have got it. Finding the balance in our district, but I just want to make sure.
Yeah, what's your plan to balance different priorities across the neighborhood, across the different neighborhoods? East Colfax has different priorities from Central Park, Montbello, and North Park Hill. How will you ensure East Colfax's concerns are prioritized?
Thank you for re-asking it. So, my name is Leslie Foragowski, obviously I'm running for Denver City Council District 8. I think first thing I need to do, we all need to do, is acknowledge how unbalanced our district is. We have people who are in deeply different financial spaces in our district. What I want to do for start is to find our common threads. For instance, we have a lot of people in Central Park who come down to the East Colfax neighborhoods and eat in our restaurants. Many of us in the East Colfax area, I'm a neighbor over here on Olive, go up to Central Park to use their businesses as well and their parks. We need to find our common threads, but also acknowledge that we're in very vastly different economic places throughout our district. One of the things I'd like to do, and it's one thing that we discussed a couple weeks ago here, is that I want to help strengthen the RNOs that might not be as well off as some of the other RNOs in our district. I'd like to use my office and its resources to help supply RNOs who might need more help because they just they depend on volunteers and small budgets. I want to be able to supplement all of that so that we're all together. And one of the other ideas that came up, again, and I'm pointing to Christian because he and I were here for a candidate coffee a couple weeks ago. The thought of having a big meeting, and say it's in a place like Ashley Elementary or one of our elementaries where we all get together, EC3, East Colfax, Greater Park Hill, Central Park United Neighbors, Montbello United Neighbors, where we have one big meeting. We offer food, we offer childcare, we offer translation services, interpretation services. And then from there, we have a meeting where we all know where we are. We all get to meet each other and we all get to interact more. And then go to our separate meetings from there for the different neighborhoods and tax partnership and whatnot. But I think it's really important that we acknowledge that even though we're in financially different places, we're all crossing each other's paths every day in our businesses, in our schools, everywhere, rec centers as well. And so I want to find those common threads and acknowledge those common threads and use those to build a relationship for people who otherwise are in financially very different places. And again, I think it's more important than anything to acknowledge that.
30 seconds.
Okay, so again, my name is Leslie Foragowski. I'm a neighbor over here on Olive Street. I've met with you before because I've been coming to East Colfax RNO meetings for a long time because a lot of my interests center around the Quebec, Colfax, East area corridor. And so I'm happy to be back here. Thank you as always for having me. Thank you, Tim, for offering this and the copies for the candidates. This is a fantastic forum. So thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Christian Stewart. I'm running for City Council District 8. How do I prioritize East Colfax? Well, I live here, so it's going to be my priority because I'm impacted by the decisions that I would make on behalf of my neighbors. But here are a few things that I propose. I think it's important to build asset maps. The idea that we are creating this list of businesses, rather it be smaller or bigger, to be able to share with our other neighborhoods, right? So they understand that we offer resources. The idea is that they will economically support our neighborhood. but they don't know if they don't those lists or understand the businesses that are on the list. I think that it's important to meet with the mayor to prioritize our businesses in the neighborhood. I think it's also important that we continue and expand neighborhood walks. And so what we do in East Colfax is that we'll do neighborhood walks. The purpose is to connect with one another and to support businesses. And so with that said, I think we invite other neighborhoods to on these walks, and I have before, to the point where we have partnered with Border, because that's Border and Central Park. And so when we can continue to do those things and meet people in a very real authentic place, I think we will make those connections. I think it's important to create quarterly meetings with all neighborhood RNOs, so we can identify the priorities, whether it's budget or laws. I think it's important that we work with DPD. We have two DPD districts in our city council district, right? We have 2 and 5, making sure that we're meeting with them on a regular basis to coordinate any overlap and include them in neighborhood events. As Leslie was saying, I think it's important that we provide admin assistance for smaller RNOs like ours. And we can ask for volunteers from the larger RNOs to perhaps come and serve on other neighborhood RNOs. I think the idea that we operate in silos and we do not have to. And so those are a few of my plans and priorities. Now, as I will continue to say, I am a community connector, and these are a few of my ideas, but it's really important that we collect each other's ideas to identify what's important to the way we are funding or overviewing budget, to the way we are creating laws. And
Good evening, I'm Rita Lewis. I'm a practicing attorney. If my voice goes out, that's because I've been in meetings all day. So, in answering the question, I am a common sense decision maker. And with that said, what I would do is I would walk East Colfax area, personally walk it with the citizens as well as our officers, and from there decide based on your input what needs to be done in East Colfax. So some of my suggestions are: 1, speed bumps. So we all know what happened last year or the year before with the gentleman that was killed just riding his bike. That's an issue for East Colfax. On the other end of town, in Montbello, the issue is youth violence. We have to do something about that. Over in Central Park, a big issue is car thefts as well as home invasions. And in Northeast Parkville, we also have car theft problems, catalytic converter problems. So each community is a little different, but my approach would be hands-on, coming up with common sense solutions. And I've been here a few times and I've said it several times, we need speed bumps. And also, I would also suggest for some of the businesses along East Colfax, especially the ones that were hit hard this summer, I would try to get funding so some of those businesses could have some type of security alarm right there that they can touch quickly, and hopefully have our brothers and sisters in the police department come out quickly. But that doesn't always help. I also suggest that we have some type of guardian angel program. We used to have it down on the other side of Colfax, and hopefully we can bring that type of service to this side of Colfax. So there's a lot of solutions. And I just think if we use common sense solutions to common problems, we can make a difference. Again, my name is Rita Lewis. I'm a write-in candidate because I missed ballot by 5 signatures, but I'm proud of that because guess what? I get to be more creative. Again, Rita Lewis.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, question 2, we'll start with Chantel and then go down the line and come back to Brad. Question 2, how do you plan to navigate city government to be effective in addressing East Colfax concerns? The question is, how do you plan to navigate city government to be effective in addressing East Colfax's concerns?
I'll answer that question in 2 ways. I think first I would start with figuring out what the concerns are of East Colfax. I think in my earlier comments, it's having conversations with the neighborhoods and the communities to really be able to understand what are the needs within East Colfax. Are the needs within the district, but what are the needs within East Colfax? One, once I'm able to ascertain what those needs are, I think the way in which I would approach that is, tell me the second part of the question, I'm so sorry.
How do you plan to navigate city government?
City government, yeah, I'm so sorry. To work with the department, so I mentioned earlier that I think about city council similar to how I would approach if I were a new CEO to an organization. That I would meet with individuals within different departments over a span of 90 days to better assess how systems work. I don't want to go into Denver City Council assuming that I know what's going on, what's important, what the challenges are, what the positives are within city government. And so having conversations with those different departments, those department heads, those leaders, to better understand what are the gaps, what are the concerns. I think it's really important that we have a space for dialogue. And so the way that I approach leadership, the way I approach community is in dialogue, to have conversations with folks to better understand what we're talking about here, because I don't know all of the departments within the city and county of Denver. I don't know everyone within the city and county of Denver from an employment lens, and so I really want to make sure that I'm checking in with folks to understand what's important to you all, what's happening within your organization, what's happening within your departments, what are the gaps, what are the priorities, and what are your needs as well. So that I can figure out how to navigate the bureaucracy once I understand it in better detail. Thanks. Would you repeat the question
Sure.
again?
How do you plan to navigate city government to be effective in addressing East Colfax's concerns?
Okay, so as many of us are bruised and battered by the East Area Plan that was recently passed, I think that's one of the first things that we need to relook at is where the East Area Plan has guided us and how we're gonna fulfill the missions in the East Area Plan and which missions we wanna fulfill first. Now, in 2027, I know that sounds very far away, but there's gonna be another bond issuance. Now, what we need to do with the residents of our district is figure out what our priorities are for getting that bond money and start getting our priorities on the bond list, whether they came through the East Area Plan or not, for things like upgrades to the Hale Parkway, upgrades to the Primaria King Supers area, sidewalks that we've been waiting for. We need to start fighting for this money. City Council needs to fight for bond and CIP, capital investment planning money. And so that is my top priority, is to ask you all to prioritize which projects you want to see coming first, and then I start fighting for that bond money. In 2016, I was successful in 2017, I was successful in securing $2.85 million for pedestrian upgrades to Federal Boulevard. I want to do that again here in East Colfax. We have so many projects that need to get done. They've been on lists for years, and we need a strong person in city council to fight. The other thing is rent control. And what we need is a city council and a mayoral administration who's willing to work with the state government to get this situation where our municipality can make our own decisions regarding rent control and not be voided out from doing it at all at the state level. One of the things I've been very disappointed in the current administration is how little they've worked with the state government to work on things like rent control or metro district reform. These aren't sexy things to talk about, bond issuance funding, metro district reform, but they're deeply, deeply important to this neighborhood fundamentally, in my opinion, and that's where I would like to put my focus, is in fighting for the dollars that you guys prioritize. Thank you.
Okay, so I currently work for the city of County of Denver. I'm a community connector for the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. We sit in an office called the Office of Community and Business Engagement. Why that's important is I already have relationships inside of the city of Denver, right? So I worked with Dottie to bring them out to our streets to analyze our traffic signals here on 13th and 14th. On that walk, they determined that the traffic signals, the timing was bad, and that's why we were having some of the crashes and the deaths. And so they implemented and installed new traffic signals. That's important to show what I've done. I also worked with DPD to invite them also on our East Colfax walks with the guardian angels, right? The idea that we're trying to launch into more of community patrol groups, but introducing in a human way DPD to our residents. Also invited the Office of the Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency on our walks, working directly inside of my department, inviting them on these walks to be able to communicate on an authentic way, especially during COVID. That was really important. Our walks, still, we were able to get things done. Worked with DDPHE, the Denver Public Health and Environment, to invite the STAR program, right? So we can, as they were expanding their program, East Colfax was a part of their target. So introducing that program directly to our residents was important. And so I also worked with the District 11 office when we created our first fare-free transportation service that Denver offered. It's called the Montebello Connector, or was. Is actually just called the Denver Connector now. It was so wildly successful, we actually expanded into District 9, Globeville, Liberty, and Swansea. And so having those relationships with these different city council members, I've done that. And so we worked with Districts 5 and 8 to raise money for our East Colfax Block Party, asking them directly for money as the East Colfax president at the time. And so what you see is that I have the relationship inside of the city and county of Denver, which gives me a unique opportunity to be impactful on day one.
On day one, I would go into the office, call Chief Thomas and say, let's take a walk along East Colfax. On day two, I would figure out how we can get speed bumps around East Colfax and around the other streets. On day three, I would figure out how we're going to use the general fund so people can pay their rent, giving them vouchers so they can pay rent, and also trying to talk to the people who will help us with rent control. On day four, I would talk to the people in the host program to talk about affordable housing. And affordable housing, I mean attainable affordable housing. Right now, the requirements for affordable housing aren't realistic. We need attainable affordable housing, so everybody can live in a house. So I'm more of a common sense approach type of person, and I'm also hands-on. I believe that action speaks louder than words, and so I would take direct action. Thank you.
So I would start with an example from this. So some of you may remember a certain infamous nightclub on Colfax, and a couple of the members of city council, they caught wind that the property itself was going to be put up for sale soon, and acted quickly and used their relationships with Vito and other parts to help acquire that land. And now what's rising up there very quickly is the Rose on Colfax, which is going to be on the first floor of the ECNA Center and an affordable housing fund. And I think that's a great example of how city council, whether or not through policy, can really navigate city government to do great things for the people of Colfax. So here's what I would like to do. Is first, like a lot of others have mentioned, you've got to listen and be in community, understand the concerns, the issues, the assets, the resources needed in this community, and have that list handy. And then second is, for my office, I want to hire people that know how to build relationships, not only in the communities that we cover, but also inside the city and county. Because as Christian so eloquently pointed out, a lot of this is built on relationships and making sure you have those. I'm also mindful of the fact that several people inside our city have told me nothing gets done from a policy perspective. 6 of your colleagues and the mayor agrees. So you want to make sure that you have really great relationships, and you can also help bring people to where they are if they're not already at where you're at in terms of how you represent the school things. So for me, it kind of boils down to how do we use relationships, how do we use influence, how do we bring people to where we need to be, and then also how do you just use speed. If you have those relationships already, you can really facilitate information and decision making and get funding. You can do a lot of great things. So that's kind of how, that's what I would do.
Thank you, candidates. And also just a plug, we did not provide any of these questions to the candidates beforehand, so this is definitely on the fly and they're required to kind of think on their feet. We thought that was appropriate because of the fact that they've been answering so many questions over the last several weeks and months. So question 3, we'll start with Leslie. Why do you think you're the best person for getting things done within the bureaucracy of Denver? Why do you think you're the best person for getting things done within the bureaucracy of Denver?
Thanks for that question. Well, this is what I've been doing for the last 11 years. For the last 9 years, I've been the director of the Federal Boulevard Business Improvement District, where I've been working, trying to get policy done with the bureaucracies of the Department of Transportation, as well as CDOT, the Parks Department, who works on our medians, and Department of Economic Development, which I want to talk about for just a brief moment. Coming up this year, and I mentioned, I think in a recent forum, the Department of Economic Development is going to be piloting a new program for legacy businesses. I'm also the chair this year of the Main Streets group. This is a group of people who represent the business improvement districts, the merchants associations, all of these things. So we're going to be working with the Department of Economic Development this year. In second quarter, the Federal Boulevard Business Improvement District will be getting our pedestrian upgrades to Federal Boulevard. 2 weeks ago, we just worked with Arts and Venues to pick out our art project. And as many of you have known me, I've served 10 years on the Parks Board, 6 years as its president, from the representative of City Council First District 5, and then when we got redistricted District 8. I've worked with parks. I know parks. I know its budget fundamentally. I worked hard on the two-way parks tax. Between all the work I've done volunteer-wise for the Parks Department, for the Department of Transportation, for Arts and Venues, for the Denver Streets Partnership, trying to add events on the South Federal Boulevard corridor, I feel that I have done nothing but work with bureaucracies with the city and county of Denver for the last 10 years. Some more successfully than others, I'll be the first to admit it. And I want to go back to what Hunter said, nothing happens fast in this city unless the mayor wants it to. That's a fundamental fact. So whatever you guys prioritize, make sure that when the mayoral candidates come through, that's who you're asking, because yes, we have influence on city council, but that's all we have in many of these situations within the bureaucracies, working with Dottie, working with parks, working with community planning and development, or DO, the Department of Economic Development. A lot of what flies through there is okayed by the mayor. And if it's not okayed by the mayor, we can't do it. So I want to keep working. Thank you very much. I want to keep pushing hard. You know, when I first ran in 2011, my house was in District 5. This area was in District 5. And we were complaining then about the lack of sidewalks on Quebec. Here we are 12 years later. That was 2011. This is 2023. 12 years later, we still don't have freaking sidewalks on Quebec. Come on. These are the things I'm asking my mayoral candidates, because I know that I can find out, but if they don't agree, we can get something.
All right, so navigating bureaucracy means that you understand bureaucracy, right? And I think you do that by understanding that relationships are essential. You know, you can be as convincing as you want to. You don't know these people, they don't care. So I'll give you a few examples of what I've done in my time with the city council. One of the ways that I said my Bellow connector, I feel like that's one of my grand achievements. But the reason why I bring that up for this particular question is because I had a fight inside of the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. We normally give consultants thousands, millions of dollars sometimes to come into the community and ask the community experts to give them opinions about what they should do in the neighborhood. I find that fundamentally wrong. And what I fought for was to make sure that if we were going to engage community, that we compensated them. We gave them community expertise compensation. They can be compensated for their time for giving it to the consultants that get paid by it. So that was one way I navigated through the bureaucracy. Another one is during COVID, we had the restaurant patio expansion. And that was, I mean, you might know some of those things, the FAFSA partnership, we worked with them to make sure that we can expand restaurant patios so they can serve food outside of the indoor space. Another thing that I co-authored 2 department-wide policies in the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. One I want to speak about is the community engagement guide. So before our team got to the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, they did not have community engagement guidelines. They did not know the way to do community engagement in meaningful ways. And so I co-authored that policy, that department-wide policy to be able to implement for any project manager, anybody coming to the community, so they have a standard of how to operate. And that includes language access, that includes things like providing for daycare, right? Any type of administrative assistant. And so, you know, these are tricky roads that you need to navigate, but it takes having the experience to do that and also the relationships.
I think I would be the best candidate because I am a practicing attorney. And my areas of law are corporate law and immigration. So with that said, I know how to read contracts, I know what the loopholes are, and not only that, from an immigration standpoint, I know what our migrant visitors need. They need housing, they need food, they need jobs. And I'm a very hands-on person. So I don't just talk about it, I go to the offices, I go to the people. And I would go to the mayor's office and tell the mayor, whoever's elected, what we need and why it's important and why it's urgent. I would go to the person that would be elected as the housing person and tell them why it's important and why it's urgent, and why it's needed. That won't always work all the time, but it works some of the time. I would go to DPD and tell them, what can we do to help you? Tell us what's out there and go from there. So I'm a very hands-on person, I'm a common sense person, and that's what I think our city needs. We need common sense solutions and get to work, make it happen. Not just try to figure it out along the way. I think day one, since I am a natural problem solver, I would be there in person at those offices, talking to people. And so that's why I think I would be the best candidate.
Thank you. So here's my answer to this question. So I've actually executed 2 different partnerships with the city and county of Denver in my professional life. The first one was to get youth apprenticeships done inside the city and county of Denver. We started with 3 youth apprentices that were hired from different communities inside of Denver, and now that program has actually expanded up to 15 youth apprentices inside the city. So these are young people who are now working for the city, training for in-demand jobs that the city needs help staffing with. And these young people get to work inside the communities that live. And I will tell you, it was a process to get that done. I had to work with actually another city council candidate, Will Chan, in his office at Vito. I had to work with the city attorney's office, because there were a lot of questions around, hey, we're gonna hire 16-year-olds and pay them $50,000 over 3 years and help get them college credit and all these other things and integrate into different offices within the city. And so that was a really sort of eyes-open experience into how do you actually get things done inside the city. The second was I served as the executive director of a partnership. It's a terrible name. This is why you don't let lawyers name things, but it was called the Government Entrepreneurial Leadership Accelerator, or GILA. It's terrible. It's terrible. But what that was working with a lot of city department heads, back in 2016, where we asked them, tell me who are your best up and coming talent within your department. And we actually want to pull them off their day job for 3 months to train them in certain entrepreneurial thinking and skill sets. And then we actually want them to study a problem that they don't work on in their day job and then propose new ideas and solutions for how to solve them to the mayor. And so if you think about asking department heads, I want you to take away your rising stars from their day jobs and go do something completely different. That took a lot of persuasion, a lot of effort, a lot of relationship building, and a lot of trust. I think what ultimately convinced a lot of them was this training that they were going to get and the experiences that they were going to have were ultimately going to benefit them when they returned to their day job. And in fact, out of the 10 people that ended up doing it, I think something like 8 people got promoted in 3 months just because their skill sets had improved so much. But I've had a couple of experiences where I've actually gotten things done at high levels inside our city. And as others have said, I'm under no illusion that change doesn't happen fast, unless you have a lot of relationships and alignment with people. So, you know, as I think about if I'm lucky enough to be elected, a lot of those early days and maybe months are going to be around building relationships, getting to know people, and also just making sure we're an advocate for what East Colfax needs in present District 8. And just making sure that the needs of District 8 are top of mind and there's relationships so that we can actually make progress on this in different scenarios. So
You're good.
So my relationship with city government actually started when I was quite young. I started with that, with my mom navigating food stamps in Canada, and similar to that experience with my mom, because I was a young mom, and when I was in my freshman year of college, I was thrust into being unhoused because my fiance was killed in a car accident, and so we had lost, my son and I had lost that income pretty quickly. I bring that up because I learned as a young mom how to navigate bureaucracy like the state and county of Denver, to be able to have access to food stamps, to have access to care, to have access to affordable housing. And it was through that access of affordable housing that I was eventually able to purchase a home in East Colfax. And so when we talk about navigating bureaucracy, I worked at some of the largest institutions within Denver or within Colorado. And so I'll tell you about a few of them. You might know this one, Denver Public Schools, where I was able to lead all of our family and community engagement efforts. And so I led a large team, overseeing over 200 schools for all family and community engagement. It really shifted how we did community engagement because we would do to communities and not with communities. And so we changed our slogans to being community-led and district-supported, which is the understanding that communities were the experts in their lives and DPS had the resources for them to be able to execute and implement the plans that they had desired to. I also served as the VP at the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, so really understanding from a city lens, because the coalition gets a lot of money from the city and county of Denver, really understanding how to build housing in partnership with institutions like the city and county of Denver. And then finally, I served on the board of RTD, which is one of 3 publicly elected boards. So I know what it means when we talk about counting votes. I know how to get things done. I've done it at the RTD level, and I will continue to do it. And so when we talk about why am I the most qualified or the best person for this job, it's because of both my lived experience, my lived expertise, but also my professional expertise, and really wanted to take that lens and that uniquely blended lens of experiences to Denver City Council, and I'm excited about that, quite frankly.
Thank you, everyone. Wonderful answers. We're gonna keep rolling just because of time and keeping the trains moving. So question 4, please tell us about your experience working with overburdened or low resource communities and how you support them or how you've empowered them. So again, the question is, please tell us about your experience working with overburdened or low resource community groups and how you supported them and or empowered them.
So let's backtrack a little bit. So my job as a community connector actually came out of an equity index that was built in public health, Denver public health environment. Right? So what they teased out were some indicators that showed neighborhoods that need a little more loving, a little more attention, a little more resources than other areas. Those 2 neighborhoods that popped out, well, there's more than 2, but for my position were Montbello and East Colfax. The reason why I was hired for the position was because I have contacts, I have relationships, because I am the co-chair of the Dr. King Jr. Parade, which is the largest celebration of Dr. King Jr. in the nation, in the world, in the universe. But the idea is that these 2 neighborhoods were really needing a little more resources. And so one of the things that we created during COVID-19 was our microgrant programs. And we offered small businesses and individuals up to $1,500 for community-led projects, right? It's not something that I led. We actually created a grant application that was very easy to access, so that the getting there, getting the money was easy, and even having um, um, evaluations be easy too. And so I worked with a few neighborhood organizations to be able to identify candidates who can do things like bike rides or support the restaurants. And so those are ways that we can be creative about how we use our government resources to make sure that this is community-led projects. We have some of the answers, but community normally has the answers, and going to them with money is how we tease those solutions out.
Along with being an attorney, I'm also the former executive director of Denver Mental Care Housing Center. And that was a very hands-on position. In that position, I made sure that our clientele was duly represented in their discrimination complaints, as well as giving them access to resources such as the TURA program, this temporary rent and utility assistance. And with that, the hands-on support that I gave them was giving them the information for resources in housing, telling them where they can go for assistance with their rent, telling them where they can go for assistance with their utilities, talking to DHA when they made an error when it comes time for people on the voucher list. And I had to do that a couple of times. DHA is not flawless. They make mistakes a lot of times. And also, as an immigration attorney, I've helped people with their immigration status. I've also helped them find housing. I've also helped them with any type of food voucher that they need. And another thing, I'm not only just saying that I'm a hands-on person, I've been a hands-on person additionally as former president of the NAACP Denver branch. So I've always been in the community. I've always helped people, and I've always taken that additional step to find solutions, give them common sense decision-making, and also be there for the community.
So one of the themes of my campaign is listen, learn, and then lead. And I've worked in nonprofits. And one of the things that I know work really effectively when you're working with communities that are under-resourced and overburdened is you go in and you listen first. You don't walk in and say, I know what you need, or here's what we're going to do. Just don't do that. The second is you just make sure that if you're looking to partner with the community and looking to work with them, is that you're coming with capacity and resources. I've heard this feedback in some of these very meetings here, that the city, foundations, other groups are often asking a lot of this community, and they have good intentions, but a lot of times, unless you're willing to provide staffing support, resources to actually effectuate change and get things done, you're just further overburdening the community that already is very busy. So I understand the constraints of heard from folks on the economic board how everybody's doing this on a volunteer basis, and it's tough to keep up with all the requests from different groups. So I think first and foremost is you got to come with capacity resources. And my own experience has been working with two nonprofits in general. So CareerWise Colorado, where we helped set up youth apprenticeships, not only here in Denver, but across the state. And a lot of school districts didn't have the resources to really get a youth apprenticeship effort off the ground without grants that actually build capacity and build resources. Second, I consulted with, it used to be called Hunger Free Colorado, setting up summer free lunch sites for kids across the Denver metro area. And again, if you're not coming with resources and capacity building, I think it's just going to fall on deaf ears because things are already so busy and so tight. So that would be my answer is how do you work.
Thank you. So here's a fun fact. So a lot of folks know that I serve on the board of the Regional Transportation District, but a lot of folks don't actually worked within RTD prior to serving on the board. So as a transit equity specialist within RTD, and I was there when the University of Colorado 8 line opened up. And I don't know if you all have ever worked with transit folks, but they tend to speak in transit jargon. And so, there you go. And so when the University of Colorado A line was opening, there were a lot of buses that were feeding into the University of Colorado A line, that were going to change. And so our staff had created this long brochure of all the changes, and it read like transit speak. It didn't read as someone who takes public transit often. And so I put together this engagement process along the University of Colorado A line, in 4 locations, in the Globeville area, Swansea area, in Park Hill, in Montbello, and in Central Park. And the intention was to ensure that we were working in community to help them to become aware of what was happening with the changes, because they were going to impact the daily lives of folks who relied on those services. And so what we did, instead of just having a normal community meeting, because who wants to go to another community meeting? It's true. We had an art show, so we partnered with local artists in those different neighborhoods to come and display their art. We also partnered with small businesses that come and cater the events as well. And then we had a part, we called it Know Your Routes, because we're corny transit people and we thought that was cute. Called Know Your Routes. And essentially with the Know Your Routes, it was an opportunity for us to be able to translate what these long documents had actually said. And the way that we got folks to come out to those events is we rode the bus. And so my colleagues and I, it's funny to see like a bunch of engineers or transportation planners on buses trying to get folks to come to these meetings. But we would ride the bus and we'd stand up in the front of the bus and be like, hey, your routes are changing. And if you want to know more, here's a quick flyer and come to these 4 meetings, whichever one works the best for you. And so when we talk about unsupported communities that are overburdened, that have a myriad of priorities, it's really about going out to those communities and making the information that you have to them most accessible, but also providing them with resources, you got it, but also providing them with resources in the meantime. And so when I talked about the art show, that was a place for the artists to be able to display their art, that was a place for our caterers to be able to display their art from a culinary standpoint, but we also partnered with the city to have them come and provide resources for those communities as well, partnered with the library to have those resources as well. And so getting really creative, when we talk about engagement, I absolutely love it. I didn't remember. Okay.
Stefan, thank you. I think I'm the last one in the line, but it's fine. Would you please, one more time, repeat the question?
Please tell us about your experience working with overburdened or low resource community groups and how you supported them and or empowered them.
Well, so I guess I'll stand. This is my day job as director of the Federal Boulevard Business Improvement District. I'm the director of a community that is one of the most under-resourced communities in all of Denver. And when I say under-resourced, I mean in terms of their housing, their transportation, investments in libraries, rec centers, everything. So in the past 9 years, what I've done is try to find exactly what Brad was referring to: capacity and, quite frankly, money, grants, loans, aids. Because what this all comes down to is money, and under-resourced communities don't have that money. But it also comes down to having a voice. One of the things I was successful in doing was I suggested a charter change that was passed by Denver voters, thank you voters, that initiated a Department of Transportation Advisory Board. Because what I saw was that those of us who had power were able to talk to people up in the higher echelons of the Department of Transportation, but people who didn't have that power were sent to 311. And that was an amazing difference in terms of control and direction over departments. That goes for the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board as well. Giving people a voice is not quite as important as giving people money, that's for sure. They're both deeply, deeply, deeply important. Also over here, talking about grants on the East Colfax corridor, I worked with the Denver Streets Partnership to secure a NACTO grant. So if you ever see at East Fax Tap or Taco Max, there's these big metal structures that came in over COVID. I delivered those in my truck. I didn't unload them myself, they were really super heavy, but the point is that you need to go out and find grants. And one of the things I want my office to do is to help communities like this go out and find grants when they don't have the capacity to have a grant writer, or to have the Power of the Denver Streets Partnership or other nonprofits helping them. It's deeply, deeply important, and Brandon has done very well with the EC3. You have to find grants, because if you don't, you just rely on volunteers, and volunteers come and go and they move to and from the neighborhood. But it's deeply important to build the capacity, thank you, through grants, and I would like to do that through my office, but also lift up people's voices within this government. Because if you're a person without power, you're sent to 311, and that's just like being brushed aside. So thank you. Oh, I lost where we're going.
Okay. Okay, last question, question 5, and then we'll move on to audience questions. So if anyone in the audience would like, there's a note card in the back, you can write it there and bring it up and hand it to us, and we'll ask a question for you, or if you want to just come up and ask a question, you can do that too. Similar on Zoom, if you want to type in your question in the chat, we'll ask that for you. Yeah, we're good. I like that. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna speed it up. So last question, we'll start with Vita. What is your plan to address the current issues in East Colfax where rapid development is taking place, potentially displacing residents and small businesses? Again, the question is, what is your plan to address the current issues in East Colfax where rapid development is taking place, potentially displacing residents and small businesses?
Thank you for that question. That's an excellent question. My plan would be, first of all, let's just have public meetings, and not just those public meetings so they give us information about it. Public meetings where the neighborhoods can actually say yay or nay to development that might encroach on their ability to live in their community. That's the main thing. Also, I'm going to go backwards in time, and I only have 2 minutes. A lot of us talked about grants, but don't forget there's a general fund. We should demand our given rights to have vouchers and have money that we deserve from the city of Denver, from that massive general fund. Also, there's a revenue. We all go to the grocery store, we pay 10 cents for a plastic bag. Where's that revenue? And there's also revenue left over from the marijuana tax revenue. We should be able to utilize that money instead of relying on grants. Grants take time. I've done that. Grants take time. But we are sitting on money at the city of Denver, and we can utilize that money in every neighborhood in District 8, including Colfax. So why don't we use that money to stop some of the development that is encroaching on East Colfax? And development isn't always bad. We need housing. We're in a housing crisis. That money in the general fund and those other ones I mentioned, that can be used for rent control. That can be used for crime prevention on East Colfax. That can be used for the sidewalks that Leslie mentioned. Very effective. Thank you.
This is a great question. I have to leave after this question here, as we've talked about. So I apologize, but if you have additional questions, if there's some way that I can get them, I'm happy to answer them via email or whatever. Come back here, I'm happy to. But so here's what I think is, this is a huge concern. I think if you see those condos that are going up at 14th and Yosemite, those townhomes that are on Uinta, you know what's already happening. This rapid development is going to happen. But I think there's some really exciting tools and strategies that can be used to prevent this and actually take back land that can be used and community controlled. So first one is going to be familiar to someone here sitting in the front row, but I think community land trusts. I've been involved with the Impact East Colfax Steering Committee, where we studied sort of the community land trust model, and we're starting to use it with some of the motels that Monica's organization has acquired. I'm very pessimistic that market rate development is going to deliver affordability by itself. And instead, I think use a community land trust model to buy land, whether it's commercial or residential, and then keep it permanently affordable. I think that's one of the main strategies we have. And I know It's my understanding that the city is also exploring using more commercial land trusts, which I think is really important to acquire and preserve commercial property for affordable business space in these Colfax. I think that's really important too. We also have the expanding housing affordability ordinance that passed last year, and if you're unfamiliar with it, it now mandates any market rate development above 9 units has to have a certain amount of affordability in it. We need to preserve and expand what we can do there. And then, you know, I think the other thing is I would love to see more community benefits agreements with developers and community, and really foster more conversations and real problem solving around how can, if there is going to be market rate development, how can the community advocate for and get hard fought, legally enforceable benefits that come back to the community.
All right, so a few things. So some folks talked about rent control, and I think it's important for us to talk about rent control. Rent control works in the short term, but in terms of long term, when we talk about displacement and stabilization of communities, we really want rent stabilization in the long term. So there are 182 municipalities that put rent control in, and it does the opposite of what we were trying to do in the long term, which is you see a lot of folks who are being displaced, you see communities that are being gentrified, and so that's important. I would also like to explore bonding renters, and the reason that I'd like to explore this is because I understand the reasons that folks are evicted. And sometimes folks are evicted or displaced from their housing from a monetary standpoint, and we talked about that quite a bit. But sometimes those evictions are caused by behavioral reasons. And so when we talk about a housing first model, it's important for us to not only offer housing first, but to couple that housing with supportive measures, such as social workers, clinical folks who can provide them with resources, access to food, access to transportation, et cetera, et cetera. I do think we need to start tracking the 5 determinants of health within social determinants of health within our contracts, also within our lease. Like, can we, when we're doing those master leases as the city, can we build those 5 determinants of health into those master leases? And then finally, I think there's an opportunity for us to explore tax credits to keep things affordable. So are there things, especially with these like mom and pop renters, and maybe not these larger conglomerates? Okay, cool. I'm with that. With these larger conglomerates, but with the mom and pop folks who have rentals that, and I think there are a few of us here who have rentals that we intentionally have to keep rents affordable for folks within our community. Can we explore tax credits for folks to keep that housing affordable in perpetuity or for as long as we can? And I think we can do that specifically for the lens of our seniors. So those are a few things.
Thanks, Stefan. Just as a refresher, would you please repeat the question?
Sorry, say it again.
Would you repeat the question?
What is your plan to address the current issues in East Colfax where rapid development is taking place, potentially displacing residents and small businesses?
Okay, well, thanks. One of the things I want to do in my office is I want to start with a staffer who's very knowledgeable about zoning. I want to hire a person who won't let what happened on 14th and Yosemite happen in this area. What we need to look at very closely and identify are places where community land trusts can be built, where affordable housing can be built. And then we need to make a proactive development plan for those areas. Because what I've seen from my city council people, not just in this district, but all of them, is not a proactive approach to building affordable housing generally. It's just kind of a thoughts and prayers, kind of a wishful thinking. But what you need to do is identify spots and then figure out the funding behind those spots, whether it's coming from nonprofit organizations, bond funding, capital improvement funding. A city council person needs to be very proactive about this. Otherwise, we're going to get nowhere. And to Brad's point, commercial district. Oh, okay. So on Colfax, we've had a rezoning that's allowed through the East Area Plan that will allow for high density. That's fine. But in those new buildings for commercial spaces, you can't sell enough burgers or tacos or injera to pay for a $10,000 a month lease triple net. You just can't do it. So we either need to incentivize the builders, we either need to work through DO. Okay, thank you. But those are the paths I want to find out. They're very similar to the paths that I'm worried about on Federal Boulevard. Because yes, I want more density on the East Colfax corridor, but I don't want it to displace the people of this neighborhood. And I certainly don't want it to displace the commercial businesses of this neighborhood. So thank you. That went so fast.
It normally does, huh? So I think it's important that we review and evaluate how property is assessed for property taxes. East Colfax, we had one of the highest, if not the highest, property tax increase of 25%. Now, that was like 2 or 3 years ago. And so that's way too much, right? What you do is make a place right for displacement, and that is what's happening here. I think it's important that we also increase fines for those who take tax dollars for affordable homes and do not build those homes, right? They'd rather just pay the fine. We need to make sure we incentivize them just paying a fine, so they do what to me as criminal. You should not take taxpayer dollars and not build affordable homes. Community benefit agreements, I think, is huge. We set the standard for who comes into our neighborhood, how they build, include them in every phase of the development, and make it legally binding. I think that's important. I also think it's important to establish funding for emergency rent and mortgage assistance. Now let's talk economics. We want to recruit organizations, the businesses of the future, right? That are going to train people for the jobs of the future that pay more than a livable wage. The idea is that we want to try to control rent and mortgage costs, but we need to increase, what people bring in, right? Everything's getting more expensive, so we need to make sure that people have more than a livable wage. And I will digress here.
And do we have any questions from anybody in the audience? The microphone.
Okay, somebody brought up 311, so I have to ask, what would each of you do to try to fix 311? I know when I called about a pothole on Monaco and Alameda, and the girl told me, that's not in Denver. And anytime I call there, that's the kind of response I get. So what do we do to fix 311?
So again, we're gonna do 2 minutes, so we'll start at Chantel.
Hot seat.
Unless you don't want it. I'll give you 90 seconds.
I won't take it up. So I have to assess first, how often those instances happening, and is that the general one, like, is that generally happening for folks, or are those one-off? It's hard for me to say how I would fix 311 without understanding what the fixes are, or what the challenges are, or what the needs are, or what needs aren't being met. And so I would first have to assess what's happening with 311 before I can answer that question, to be honest.
Thanks. So as I mentioned, and I think you're referring to me as who brought up 311, my frustration led me to a charter change where I could enact a Department of Transportation advisory board so I could talk to the people who were in charge. Because unless we on Federal Boulevard brigaded 311 with dozens of calls, we got no action. It's kind of a catch-all where I feel like our city government kind of tosses people off into. And so quite frankly, I'm unthrilled about 311, in case that's not clear. It's great in that they record the calls, and that's a little something, but not much, because if there's no action behind 24 calls that you might get about that pothole on Monaco and Alameda, that we're not getting anywhere. And I just honestly, I felt that 311 over the last few years has been a way for our city government to shirk us off into a telephone black hole, whereas you suggested they don't even know that Monaco and Alameda is in Denver. Like, come on.
So 301 actually sits in the Office of Community Business Engagement. So the person's name, he's probably gonna hate me for this, is Sam Como, right? So we just hired him 3 weeks ago. So some of the things that I've been pondering with him, how do we improve the system? Because that's where things go to die, right? Like, I suggest you get references numbers, but a couple of things that I've been talking to him about is how do we identify people in neighborhoods, especially like ours, that are going to have their reference numbers escalated. So the idea might be me or somebody from R&Os that if they're going to make it, you know, like, okay, whatever this code is, it's gonna get escalated. Because what we see in our neighborhood here in Montbello in particular, is that 311 calls, I mean, you get work done when you have more hits, right? It's data that drives decision. That's one of Dottie's, things. So if you don't have enough people calling it in, then they're not going to address it. So one of the other things that I propose is 311 task force from inside of our office, but inside of Dottie in general, where we have people who actually work inside the office, who go out into the communities that are underrepresented when it comes to 311, and have them, the task force, actually see when there's an issue, and then be able to escalate it to San Como.
30 seconds.
San Como. But these are some simple solutions. They're not simple. I'm not gonna say they're simple, but I think that we need to be more intentional about how our neighborhoods are being addressed, because there are other neighborhoods that are getting what they ask for, but they are also available and know how to work systems. And so that's a part of what we need to work through too.
I feel you. I was on 311 yesterday. You know what I did? I backdoored it and I called that number directly to the department I needed. So in my opinion, 311 should be audited. They do good work, don't get me wrong, but I was number 42 in line. I was not about to wait that long. So there needs to be an audit of 311 so we can do something better. And I would suggest that we have some type of menu on that 311 when you're waiting, number 42, and then press 11 or 12 for your department. To me, it's just common sense. We need to have another prompt so we can get it directly to that department.
I think a lot of us don't know what the department is, which is why they end up calling 311. But if they can't direct us either, then that's the problem.
When 311 is not responsive, what do you typically do thereafter?
Call the media or call my city council person or send an email to my brother's redevelopment.
Is your city council person typically responsive?
No, Amanda Sawyer, no, I hate her so much. And I
Wonder one might be better served by council. So we do constituent services, and I wonder if 311 might be better as a part of individual offices because they're responding to those things anyway. So that's why I wanted
or the triage, like, I feel like this is how I picture it, and it might be totally wrong. We have somebody who we expect them to know everything in the city, and we're probably paying them minimum wage. And there's high turnover because we're paying them nothing, and they can't learn everything. And then like the job is so demanding, they're gone. And so I think we're not looking at it the right way. And we're not going about it the right way. We think it's an entry level thing, but the knowledge you need to do that job well is never going to be obtained by someone making minimum wage.
So do you want to give 1 minute for additional?
I just want to move on.
I wanna move on, because we have 7 minutes till 8, we still gotta do announcements. I think what I was gonna say is, it's not a stop, it's a, until next time, because Saturday, there is a forum at Ashley Elementary from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m.
Yes.
And that is the Anti-Displacement, District 8 Unified Neighborhood Forum. Then on March 26th, also 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. here at Counterpath, we have a coffee with candidates. So Brad Rivera will be back, so will Chantel Lewis, and then Tyler Drum should be here as well. And unfortunately, Tyler was not able to make it. We did not have a way to do hybrid, unfortunately, so I do apologize to Tyler, we cannot figure that out, but the audio, particularly the visual, were tricky things for us to navigate, and we barely barely got it going. Anyway, so, sorry, Tyler. I think we have time for one more, if there's one more question from the audience, if not. Okay. Last question, and are we doing 2 minutes again?
Yes, 2 minutes for every candidate to respond.
Hi, I'm Brandon Green, with East Colfax Community Collective, and been participating on the Equity and Rezoning Task Force. And also, we were really involved in the East Area Plan. A lot of times, when we're in planning spaces, what we're told is that we have to take a balanced approach. And that we have to make sure everybody's treated equally, right? But equally is not equity. And, you know, in this district, we now have 3 nest neighborhoods that have been prioritized because they're at risk of displacement. And how, as city council members, we all change that conversation, because as long as we're treating neighborhoods like East Colfax and we're trying to balance that with neighborhoods that are more privileged and powerful, like we aren't going to get the resources we need. And so how can we approach that in a different way? How can we elevate that need for equity in the way resources are allocated to them?
So maybe we'll start with Leslie and then go around here.
Thank you, Brendan, and thank you for all the work you've done. I know that we were kind of in the trenches at the same time with the East Area Plan. It was really disappointing in the East Area Plan to get just I mean, the nod to affordable housing was essentially just a paragraph deep within the plan. I think we need to do precisely what you said and precisely what I said in my first answer, which is we need to start by acknowledging that we're not equal. We're not equal, and we deserve different resources. And to be quite frank, for the folks that I've been talking about in Central Park, many of them acknowledge that. And I think it's important to get that voice out, because I don't think, I don't want to be combative with our different neighborhoods in District 8, because I think that some of the more affluent parts of it are more willing to share resources than we give them credit for. And I want to tune into that, because I think many people in our district understand that there are parts of our district that are severely under-resourced and would agree that they deserve more resources than perhaps they do, or different resources. I think that's a discussion that a lot of people in this district are willing to have. And I don't think that we should make assumptions that our wealthier neighborhoods are unwilling to give up money or resources to our other neighborhoods who don't have as much. Because from what I've seen, and again, this is not a scientific, data-driven survey, but in the conversations I'm having, people push that. And so let's use that.
So, listen, we can have as many advocates inside of our city government as much as possible. People get term limited, they don't get reelected, and so the work that goes, or that comes with them, goes with them for a lot of reasons. What I would propose is actually reviewing laws with an equity lens, right? Let's see what laws could, benefit from us creating other laws that have equity lenses. I think the same thing about the way money is spent. How do we make sure that we prioritize based upon the way the city budget is, where equity is a part of it, right? It needs to be, to me, I don't think it should be like people reading like, oh, that's not equitable. We need to have like an actual system approach to reviewing budget, reviewing law with an equity lens. And so I also think that it's important that our roles, we craft laws, pass laws, we craft budget, pass budget, and then we approve mayoral appointees, right? Mayoral appointees are the department heads. They are the directors that set the tone for their department. We need to make sure that before we approve them, that we ask for them to have equity policies in the way that they operate the departments. I think if we expect them to do that, then they're going to set the tone. And so, yeah, I think based upon what we're able to do, laws, budget, approve mayoral appointees, that's how we comb through, all these things to make sure they're equitable, that they will survive beyond an actual candidate or an actual elected official.
first thing I would do, if elected, is to come to you, that's the first thing. You know what's going on in your neighborhoods, you know what the problems are, you know what the benefits are. So equity starts there. What do you want in your neighborhood? I mentioned speed bumps earlier, and I know that's been an issue with people flying up and down in this neighborhood. So that's my approach, that's what I would do, come to you, and then if there is some type of community plan that we need to devise, make sure that you all have input, because this is your neighborhood. And I say that for all factions in District 8. Every neighborhood is different. We need to get the input from the neighbors. And not just because we're running for office, but because it's important. Every neighborhood in District 8 is totally different. You have the high level in Central Park, Summit, you have Park Hill, you have East Colfax, and East Colfax is so historic. I know you all know this is probably the longest street in Denver that runs from downtown all the way over to the west side, all the way over to past I-70. So there is so much pride in East Colfax. So we need to, as a community, as a city, think more about how do we protect the historic East Colfax and listen to you and listen to what you need.
So at RTD, our policies are called resolutions. And so I put together a justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion resolution for the entire agency. And what I found in my work at RTD is that we were often talking about justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and we assumed that we were defining those in the same way, that we had somehow created this shared language, and so our resolution provided us the opportunity to say, this is how we're defining justice, this is how we're defining equity, this is how we're defining diversity, and this is how we're defining inclusion. And from that, we were able to build those shared definitions. And then as we were planning what our strategic priorities were, we were building those intentionally in terms of like metrics of accountability into those shared priorities, so that we all understood them. And then once you have proposals that are in front of you, you go back to those metrics, to those accountability metrics, and you're able to score against those, like, is this actually equitable? And more specifically, we had a lens where we understood, okay, there are communities that have been intentionally or historically left out and harmed, and so how do you mitigate that harm? And so that was a consideration once we had those policies or those projects in front of us. And so it was easy to say, okay, we're going to put a bus here or a bus stop, or should we be building out this train? And it's like, well, let's talk about the communities that have been harmed historically and how do we mitigate those things while looking through the lens of equity and the way in which we have defined how we are, how we have created those shared definitions. So that's, I would do the same thing, right? Is to get on the same page to make sure when you say equity and I say equity that you're not talking about equality and I'm actually talking about equity, but we've defined it so explicitly, excuse me, that no one's confused.
Thank you so much, candidates. I think that is all the questions we're going to take for now. So we give our candidates a round of applause. And if the candidates want to stick around and answer questions, that would be great. You can do that. We're going to do announcements in here. So if you can do that in the other room or if you do it outside, that would be wonderful. But we're going to run through our announcements real quick. I don't think we have a ton, but we're going to go through the list real quickly and then call it night. So District 5, Jen Groves, would you like to give an update?
I don't really have much. I'm gonna put in my New York Jew voice and be heard. So some of you came to the meeting last Wednesday night with members of DOTI and DPD. Not from, I think we only had honoraries from D2. Most of the staff were more parking enforcement related. And we did the full 2 hours, actually longer when it came to the interpreters, but we are working on getting a final edit and approval done on our FAQs. We're going to post them on our site. We are going to send them to the ECNA Gmail address. I hope that if nothing else that you felt heard, we knew that a lot of people's questions were not necessarily going to be answered fully, but the conversation has started. even though D5 is losing east of Quebec, once redistricting goes into effect, we are planning on keeping this discussion active, and should Councilwoman Sawyer win re-election, and whichever one of you or Brad or Tyler wins, we hope to continue that relationship on working on 13th and 14th Avenues. I know I don't see Emily here unless I don't recognize Emily. It's been a while. I have the parking enforcement email address for you. So the other thing is we are working on the D08 overlay application. I know that you were going to want to talk with us about that. We have downsized it to emphasize that to be more focused at where the BRT stops are going to be rather than the whole of East Colfax. That just seems to be more attainable, more logistical, because that's where a lot of developments can be happening. Have the foot traffic where there's going to be the most foot traffic, and trying to preserve some other things in other places. I do have some answers on my computer, except I realize I'm gonna need Wi-Fi to pull up the presentation because it's on OneDrive. But yeah, we can go over some of the results that we got from the survey. I know that was sent to you folks, but we can talk about it. If indeed, I can hang around for a little bit. That's really it in terms of what I have for you. So.
Can I add on to your, so somebody from that meeting, that actually reached out to Danielle already, so there's already.
I feel in that situation, what our role was to get the conversation started, because there's some things where, I mean, I heard it amongst you folks earlier tonight. Getting directly to the department is sometimes the best way, and even when we have constituents call us, we have our list of who to reach out to in the departments. So if you, once you get that connection, hold it tight, don't let go, and find out names of colleagues, so if your person leaves the city, then you can get to this one. Right, I'm gonna shut up now.
Thanks, Jen. District 8, do you have anyone from District 8 that wants to give an update?
Yes. Hi, everyone. It's Bonnie online. I don't know if you can all hear me. But Bonnie with Councilman Herndon's office. I've actually been on maternity leave for the past 4 months, so I'm just transitioning back into work, hence why I'm home tonight with the baby. Only announcement I have is regarding Northeast Denver Leadership Week. It is our free leadership program for high school students. This year's program is June 7th through 9th. It is a free program. Application deadline is March 26th, and the website is northeastdenverleadershipweek.org. That's all I have. Thank you.
Welcome back.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks, Bonnie. Everybody says welcome back. Congratulations.
Thank you. Hopefully next month baby will be awake and I can just have him make a quick cameo. Thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie. About from DPG, any updates that you all would like to give?
We'll make this very quick. Sorry, I know being sensitive of everybody's time, but we just wanted to come and introduce ourselves. I'm Lieutenant Sam Sigler. I am the acting commander for District 2. For some of you that don't know, Captain Bancroft retired after 36 years.
Wow.
For his service. So, to the conferences, commander of interim, I've been in District 2 for the last 3.5 years, but not for over 18 years. One of the new members of our team is Lieutenant Julie Wheaton, who is going to be the Sector 2 Lieutenant, which, as a reminder to everybody, Sector 2 involves East Colfax. So that's why we're here. So what we've been doing since Commander Bancroft's retirement is really kind of going on a hospitality tour and introducing ourselves. We scheduled meetings with all the council people that touch this district, but also all the community. So we have kind of a fresh team, but you know, without getting into too much detail, we are scheduling all these meetings. We hope to meet everybody. Not just me, but also Lieutenant Wheaton. And honestly, one thing we're going to try to do is get more of the officers that actually are out there answering calls to get to know them. getting to know us, you know, it's only helpful so far, but actually starting to try to establish relationships with those officers, we think is just crucial. So one of the things that Julie and I are hearing tonight is relationships and engagement. And I can tell you from a District 2 perspective, and from a command staff perspective, that is one of our goals moving forward. We'll take baby steps and we'll get to know people, but again, as the scene is been going tonight, we don't get things done without those solid relationships.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you both for listening. Nest, any updates? None. And what about GLC? Anything from GLC? Anything? Nothing?
Real GLC updates, constitution purpose kind of the planning phase. But wanted to remind folks that there is a community safety meeting tomorrow at Hope Communities. Everybody's invited. The DPD will be there. A lot of nonprofit partners will be there. And so if you're able to come by, it'll be at Hope Communities, 1313 Xenia Street. And then just another plug for this weekend's Anti-Displacement District 8 Unified Neighborhood Forum that's being co-hosted with, Northeast Park Hill Coalition, Greater Park Hill, Mount Bello Organizing Committee, Mount Bello 2020, ourselves, East Colfax Community Collective Counterpath, East Colfax Neighborhood Association. And so it's a conglomeration of the new District 8. And we're really excited to have our candidates there. Doors will open at 9:30. And so for candidates, I'll send this out in an email tomorrow, but you're welcome to come early to mingle with folks. And then we'll have questions from 10 to 12:30. And then there'll be an opportunity to mingle after the fact. So looking forward to a longer space that we can be together, and one of the last opportunities to really ask questions. So hope people can join us. It'll be at Ashley Elementary.
Thank you. Thanks for that plug. Accurate information. Anybody else have any updates that they want to give?
Hi, Monica Martinez with the Facts Partnership. We have a few. On April 6th, we're going to be having a business breakfast, and acting commander Sam will be there, as well as Lieutenant, who I just met, Julie Wheaton. We also are going to be having a community meeting on April 25th. You should be getting a mailer for this. This is for our motel site. As you know, we will be converting those to shelter in September, and so this meeting is for that zone lot amendment that we need, because we're consolidating the two motels into one zone lot. And this is a procedural step that you'll see. We also have, so VOA will be taking over these motels in September, so we'll have them come out to a community meeting and have you all meet them. Rehab of those motels will begin this summer, so you may start seeing some construction there. We're going to be putting in fire alarms and rehabbing some of the units that aren't currently usable. Lastly, you may have seen in the news, we had the launch of the East Colfax East Colfax Cultural District, and we have the logo now set. We have the logo, we received over 360 votes, and it was a close race, but the final logo was selected, and you guys probably all, look at this, just keep walking. So we're really excited with this logo. Window clings are here, they're not super clingy. We're working on that, but please grab a window cling. We have pens and awesome reusable bags. I hope you take a bag home with you. Use these around. We're really excited about this. We're working to put up a couple murals here on the corridor, and so we'd love to have you all come out and get a little dirty with some paint. And then this effort will continue throughout this year to really just use this as an ability to support our local businesses. We're excited to have a brand so that they are cohesive and celebrated, and like Chi said on the news, claim. That's the operative word for this culture district. Thank you.
Yeah, come on back out. There's a forum, District 8, and Rita, I think you're planning to come out on Sunday. And we're going to have Chantel and Tyler and Brad. So we're gonna kind of go through this again. This kind of ended up being a little smaller, but this is gonna be even smaller, moderated by Lamone Knowles. And it's, you know, it is another component of the newly organized District 8, as people have been referring to it, and we dedicate every one of them to the newly organized anti-displacement district. And then you can take a postcard, which is right out here with all of the remaining forums that we have. We also have a mayoral forum coming up on Sunday at 1 o'clock with Al Gardner and Terrence Roberts and possibly Trinidad Rodriguez. We kind of reorganized at the last minute. And to remind everybody also, we have a food bank that happens here on Fridays from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. And we can still to donate. We've been going on, this is our 5th year of doing the food bank, and we're really kind of pumping out the food. The shelves are nearly empty. We've had a real uptick, I think, lately for whatever reasons. We also have a free bookstore operating out of here, so you know, take as a book, take as many as you want, and donate as many as you want to. It's official hours on Saturdays from 4 to 6. Matt Hybert is running that then. This on the wall is an exhibit about ShotSpotter technology that's in the neighborhood here, done by the artists and residents at Counterpath, Ben Coleman, who has been spent a month researching this, where they're appearing in the East Colfax neighborhood, why they're here, how much money is being spent on this technology from the city, and he's done a lot of research on the results or lack thereof from this stuff. So really great stuff. We're going to take it down soon.
Is Ben gonna do a presentation on this? Because I would love to hear and be able to ask him questions on the ShotSpotter.
You know, I think he's going to take it down quite soon. And I think he did a ECNA thing, and you can also, you know, follow.
QR code is right here.
The QR code.
Wherever to follow it. But he did that last meeting.
Yeah.
Quite a detailed presentation.
Oh, good.
Oh, I
That's
can't
great.
wait
Yeah.
to see it. Okay, great.
Yeah, this is
Sorry
it.
to
Yeah.
interrupt.
Yeah, no, that's all good. And so now that I have your attention, this week, Thursday, here is a screening and performance by a great artist, Eric Fees and Carl Ritter, sound performance. Come on back, it's free, open to the public, amazing stuff. And then on the 31st, we have a screening with Amy Reed and others. It's again, free and open to the public, going on right here in the East Colfax neighborhood. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, and thanks, Tim, for having us, hosting this space, and if nothing else, we will call it a night. So thank you, candidates, thanks for everyone for being here, and take care of yourself.